Thank you. And if you're watching out there, my name is Eric Kagama. I serve currently as the CEO and the president of the Africa Chamber of Digital Commerce. And today I'm hosting the ACFDC, a series, special, one of our specials, for the ACFDC Summit, coming up, in Dubai in March, 18, coming up in March, the 18th in Dubai. And before I do the intro, before I introduce our guest, and I just want to make sure the virtual audience and the people that are, I want to thank you all for joining us, and you at home that are streaming on YouTube. Thank you a whole lot for making time and joining us here. And the chamber here, just to kind of give you a little bit of what we are in the chamber here, in the Africa Chamber of Digital Commerce. We a chamber that is led by the African diaspora led, and also we tell people we're in the business of other people's business. That's what we do, and we primarily are focusing on technology, how technology can be leveraged, to spur growth, like in Africa from collaboratively with the diaspora and also some of our brothers and sisters, in Africa as well, and along on that journey as well, allies. We also work with allies to make sure we're able to accomplish, that goal. And as we've done, like in the past, we wanted to be interactive, we wanted to be engaging, and just unrehearsed. I typically I don't like doing rehearsed, podcasts and stuff like that. But I am also glad, we have a special guest, in our virtual studio today, and I would love to welcome, Jim Chu. Jim Chu wears multiple, hats, and that of entrepreneur and also an investor and a philanthropist, and so many other things that he does. And I feel you'll have the opportunity today to get to virtually, interact with and hear from, Jim Chu as well. And without, wasting so much time, I would love to, kind of just introduce, Jim Chu. Jim Chu is a pretty interesting individual. He currently serves as the CEO of the Untapped Global, and also doing a lot of things with with the relief in Haiti as well. You get to hear a little bit of that as well. And without wasting much time, I'll kind of just want to nudge it to Jim. Jim, thank you for honoring both accepting to be one of our speakers, and also partnering with us to power the deal hub, the deal room, the investment deal room, for the ACOFDC Summit that is coming up on March the 18th, in Dubai. Thank you and welcome, Jim.
Thank you very much, Eric, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today, but also for the opportunity to work with you and your team and to meet all the various investors in Dubai in March 18th. So we're very much looking forward to that, and myself and my team included.
Awesome. And a lot of people, I'm sure, are wondering out there, what motivated you? I know you probably, you're a native, San Franciscan, right?
From the Pacific Northwest, Seattle.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
West Coast.
So if you can just share with us a little bit, how the journey began for you, and that would be pretty interesting.
Well, we were chatting a little bit before we started the recording. You're from the north of Nigeria, but there's part of that. There's part of my story that intersects with that. My upbringing and my education was very standard. Suburban America, Stanford University. And then I worked at Cisco Systems in the mid 90s. That's what you do. You work in tech, of course, if you graduate from Stanford, and that, especially that decade. But there's always this desire to see my work be more impactful. And I at that point, I left Cisco in 2003, and then started doing volunteer work pretty much around the world, in India, but also in Nigeria, and I was based in Abuja for a year, working with Doctors Without Borders, and we were all over the country, in Port Harcourt in the south, and in Lagos, of course, in Plateau State, etc. But what I found was that, and I don't think I knew how to describe it this way back then, but there was a limitation to aid. There was a limitation to charity.
Yeah.
And what I found was even though Doctors Without Borders was a great organization, very well run, I didn't see us solving the core problem where we worked. We weren't solving the lack of agency in the country of Nigerians being able to help themselves. And this idea of outside aid coming in, again, back in 2003, this was in 2003, 2004.
Yeah.
I didn't really put my finger on it, but it didn't feel quite right. In any case, I went back to the private sector, did a few startups, but in 2010, I got involved with aid again, aid and charity. I was a donor and a volunteer in Haiti after the earthquake in 2010. And that's when I spent more time in the aid. I spent a couple of years before I concluded that aid and charity often, like I said, didn't help, or it wasn't solving the core problem, but oftentimes actually worsened the problem. Because it created ecosystems and incentives and basically whole sectors or industries around aid, versus creating value and innovation around how to solve core problems. So I really switched in the last 11, 12 years to, okay, how do we support entrepreneurs in markets like Haiti, in many other markets in Africa, and in Nigeria? How do we support entrepreneurs to solve those problems? Not outsiders in aid, but entrepreneurs who really understand the problem, who are part of the community, who are motivated in the right way to solve those problems. So that's where I decided to put my focus in the last 10 years. And I've really, more and more and more that I see, I believe that the right way to drive equitable growth and development is by supporting entrepreneurs. And so what we do today, really, as Untapped Global, is we're just a bridge. Our goal is to connect international investors with the most promising markets, the most promising companies, and the most promising entrepreneurs in these emerging markets. And, in order to do that, we've created, I think, very innovative investment models for doing that. Our smart financing, our smart asset financing model, for example. But we also do things in very typical ways. We have an equity venture fund, for example. So, or multiple actually. So, and I personally invest quite a bit directly in many of the companies that I come across in Kenya and South Africa, in Nigeria, in Egypt, etc. So the journey really is, typical Joe Schmo tech worker, if you will, if you want to call it that, to your typical charity aid volunteer, to what I think is a more, after some insight, a strong belief that investment in entrepreneurship will be the best path to creating equitable economic growth and a better society and better economy in many of the fastest growing countries around the world.
Awesome. And I just quickly, could you contrast, like your experience, just working as with an aid organization and now and also what you're doing with, let's say, Untapped, global.
The contrast is really easy, I'm simplifying because not every aid organization or NGO or charity is the same, and not every business is the same. And there's a lot to do with large organizations versus small organizations, things like that. But if I were to put a very broad general contrast between the two, is aid and charity is about allocation of wealth and money, right? It's almost a bureaucracy. It is a bureaucracy, right? In many cases, aid and NGOs are taking over, or at least temporarily supplanting the function of governments. And entrepreneurship and the business world, especially small businesses, are about creating value, not about just allocation of wealth. It's about the creation of wealth. So when I was a volunteer for Doctors Without Borders, I often felt, and again, I didn't put my finger on it back in 2003, 2004, but it was, oh, I'm just a bureaucrat. I'm just moving money around. Yeah. I'm just making sure that the money that came from donors are being spent in the way that we said we would spend it. Forget for a second whether it's actually effective. Now, obviously, everyone's trying to be effective, but organizationally, that wasn't the goal of the organizational task force or the people in the organization. They were there, just like a government, to look after taxpayer money or look after donor money and make sure that it's properly reported how money was being spent.
Yeah.
In a business, especially in startup businesses, the whole approach is different. It's, yeah, you have to, make sure you track where you spend your money, but it's about what your end result is. And end result is not, just X number of people served, which can be very, I think, misleading sometimes, but rather how many people do we get to value whatever we're providing, product or service, so much they're willing to part with their valuable shillings or naira or
Absolutely.
rand. And that, I think, is what businesses do well. They innovate to create value.
Creating, just instead of there's also the fact that that also promotes some kind of redundancy, right? People just sit around and expect people to just hand them money.
Right.
Instead of kind of to dig in a little deeper and kind of just think of creative ways to sustain themselves.
I mean, look, and that's what I refer to as ecosystems of incentives. Yeah. If you go to Haiti, and you already have most of the most intelligent people in Haiti realizing very quickly this is the truth.
Yeah.
The best way to get money is to become a politician. The best way to get money or to be well off is to work for an international NGO and get paid a nice fat salary.
Yeah.
And just be and this is no disrespect to people working that, but just to be a bureaucrat. And that's what many of the most intelligent Haitians that I've met have become. They've become, I would even say, second or third class bureaucrats in this international system that doesn't really give them agency. They're just cogs in a very big wheel. And what I argue is that those same people, if, like you said, the system was different, they wouldn't be dependent on, well, what does the IDB say? Or what does the World Bank say? Or what does USAID say? Forget that. Forget what they say. They don't know what's going on in Haiti. They don't understand what's happening in Kenya, truthfully. Let the entrepreneurs who live those lives day in and day out, let them solve the problems. Let's give them the means to innovate and solve problems. Now, I say that very, like a hand wave, very glibly. Yeah, it's so easy. Just throw out a bunch of money and everything's solved. No, it's not that easy, right? You have to figure out how to allocate investments in a way that goes to the most innovative, to the most successful, to the most motivated, to the most capable. And that's not as easy as one thinks. Absolutely. So that's where our job is as Untapped Global, is to efficiently allocate global wealth towards the most productive entrepreneurs and businesses in emerging markets and in the most dynamic markets.
It makes a whole lot of sense. And I just want to kind of just segue a little bit. And in your Stanford, days, for instance, what was it like, for you? Did you have a lot of interactions, I know, with Africans? I know some, there are a few Africans, Nigerians, and also Kenyans and others that I know that have also been, that attended, Stanford, being an Ivy League and all that.
No.
Was there any interaction with
very little. I mean, I think even today there's stark underrepresentation, and and I think that's, part of just where Stanford is, right? Stanford is in the tech world. It's very close to Asia. My class at Stanford was a quarter Asian. So there was definitely that focus, but there's definitely a disconnection, I would say, from emerging markets and an understanding of how 2/3 of the world live. We, as a Stanford student, back when I was a Stanford student in the early 90s, and today even, people think the whole world is about the metaverse. The whole world is about the marginal gains of technology, and they don't realize that if you apply those same technologies, that same innovation to solving very basic problems, access to drinking water, access to transport, access to healthcare, if you apply those things to those problems, there's a much bigger upside.
Absolutely. And talking about drinking water, I know you have there's one of your projects, initiatives that has to do with water. Could you expand on that a little bit? I would love to kind of just, I would love for others to.
So that's actually how I got involved. Completely by happenstance. I became a donor in Haiti, doing clean water infrastructure, and I became a volunteer for the organization that I donated to. This was back in 2010, exactly 2010, and so I got very involved in the water sector in Haiti. I think I got to understand WASH, as they say, water and sanitation, very well, in a very specific way. In the how do we make entrepreneurs capable of solving or providing clean water for themselves? So I got there, and I initially it was all very charity based, right? NGO based, donor money and so on. But I think I realized over time that model would not serve.
It's not sustainable, right?
Not only not sustainable, it created the wrong incentives.
Okay.
As I always like to say, in aid or in charity, you always have two customers. Every organization has two customers. One is the donor that cuts you the check, or the grant giver, or whoever it is. And the people, or the word they use in that world, is beneficiaries. The beneficiaries that you're trying to serve. And what I found, and this is just a organizational systemic thing. It wasn't that people were bad or people were, conniving in any way. I mean, obviously you have good and bad people everywhere, but it was systemic. If you wanted to run a good organization, a large organization, the ones who become large become very good at fundraising. They become very good at serving customer number one, the donor. And whether they're good at serving the second customer has actually not a whole lot to do with the first. And in fact, in many cases, it actually is contrary to being able to serve the first well. Because oftentimes, if you want to raise money from American donors, you have to position what the situation is in a certain way. And I don't want to say, because I don't believe this is the case, that people are trying, NGOs are trying to keep people poor so they can earn. Now, I don't think it goes to that extent. But the dynamic leads to that, even though the intent might not be there. Oh, another hurricane in Haiti. Oh, that just means more donor money coming in. And the organizations spin up to do a good job of communicating that to donors. Whereas they should be solving the problem, how do we make these communities more resilient in the first place? So that when there is the next hurricane that comes, they don't actually need outside help.
Absolutely. And it's pretty painful, seeing what is going on in Haiti. And the Africa Chamber of Digital Commerce, one of the reasons why I thought, we decided to take a Pan-African approach and also look beyond Africa, send folks that are ancestrally from the continent. If you look at, Salvador Bahia, for instance, in Brazil, a high population of people of African descent, for instance. And if you look at, the CARICOM nations, and I believe, Haiti, not Haiti, but the CARICOM nations, and also nations and places like Haiti, and which you continue to see the same trend there. You know, poverty it's something that is that has pervaded, you know, pretty much everywhere, and with the donor money and everything that has been pumped, you know, there, and you never see the result, you know, remains what it has been, you know, for a couple of years now, and that is the reason why we said there is need as an organization for us to have the change of mindset. And I particularly was not fond of the fact that, you know, you have to chase donor funds, like just you set up a nonprofit or whatever it is you are, and with the whole mindset that, oh, I have to go and queue up somewhere and ask for. I was like, hey, it doesn't matter how low we start, you know, but we're going to first look amongst ourselves, you know, where we can mobilize, and then before we can look somewhere else. And I said, we within the diaspora here, we have people that are blessed, you know, some are in JP Morgan of this world, EY and Deloitte and this world. I was like, why can't we look, you know, inwards and build something that we could monetize and raise money and do and do much more sustainably. I was like, most organizations end up, you know, chasing the donor money, and you expend it on send overheads, and you don't even get to do the job. I was like, no. I was like, we have to change the mindset and say no.
We have to break the vicious cycle, right?
Absolutely.
We have to break that vicious cycle. The vicious cycle of, what's the best way to get money? Appeal to donors, give more money, and it creates its own life. It becomes its own organism. We have to stop that. And I know it's a long-term journey to break that cycle, but I think that's what our goal. That's what our mandate
absolutely
is.
And I'm absolutely delighted with what Untapped is doing, and staying with Untapped, you know. So what has been, you know, one of the I would say, let me frame it this way: when did your activity with Untapped start, you know, like on the continent? You know, how did it all?
It really all started in Haiti. All roads led from Haiti, because it was through that experience of, first of all, the charity aid experience that led me to entrepreneurship, or the focus on entrepreneurship. I then launched a company with the IFC, which is the World Bank's private investment arm, rolling out water infrastructure throughout Haiti and underserved areas of Haiti. But then we realized that the ecosystem, and you know, it seems so obvious now, but it takes the ecosystem to create entrepreneurship.
Absolutely.
Right? It doesn't just take entrepreneurs. It takes a whole bunch of different kinds of financing institutions, of investors, from angels to early stage investors to growth investors to PE firms to commercial banks. It requires all of that. And I realized how many gaps were in the market, not just in Haiti. And I thought initially it was just a Haitian thing. It wasn't. It's you have all these gaps in that innovation ecosystem, if I may say, that entrepreneurship ecosystem. And that was what was holding things back. And so we actually, you know, conceived of the idea of Untapped back as early as 2013, 2014. The name Untapped was created in the mountains of Haiti, in fact.
Okay.
I credit a group of friends, one of whom, Joanne Maislin, who was a consultant in Haiti. And I was saying, look, we got to take this thing, what we're doing in Haiti, global. And we brainstormed and came up with this name of Untapped, around the untapped potential that exists around the world, and how are we going to unlock that untapped potential. And so, you know, the journey is not short. From there, we started doing more and more. We ended up doing a lot of things in Haiti, and then we started investing in Africa, and we started doing water projects in Africa, just like we did in Haiti. But then we realized that, you know, we needed to move much faster. And
absolutely.
And today we finance all sorts of different asset types, from equity investments.
What's the size of your team, if you don't mind? You know what, I know you operate in a decentralized way as well. And what's the size of
Yeah,
your team?
yeah. So we have about 25 people,
Awesome.
and they're all over the continents. We have
Yeah.
a fairly sizable office in Nairobi,
Okay.
and then we have a couple of people in Cape Town,
Cape Town. Okay.
and we're just bringing on board some folks in Egypt, and a lot of our team is very well connected with Lagos.
Okay.
Even though we don't have anybody physically present there, we're very well connected. One of our investment officers is Nigerian.
Okay.
One of my other investment officers lived in Lagos for a couple of years. So those are really the four areas that we focus. Those four target markets that we focus on: East Africa, Nigeria, and a little bit of West Africa outside of Nigeria, North Africa, including Egypt and South Africa.
Awesome. And I think we now want to kind of venture a little bit into the the whole tech ecosystem. And one thing we really want to discuss, one of the themes, like for the ACOFDC Summit is about inclusivity. And I really want to, being that, you're a son of an immigrant yourself, your parents, proudly, proud of all the things, you've accomplished and also doing, adding value to humanity in such a tremendous way with your various, like ventures. The issue of inclusivity, how can, from a gender lens, I'm glad you have a couple of, ladies, working at OnTap, how do we accelerate, inclusivity? If you look at it from a gender and also geographical and racial, how can we have more? Because you live in the valley, 10 years ago, it was, like going and you as a startup company, if you're not somewhere in the Silicon Valley,
forget 10 years ago. I mean, that's still the way it works today. Let's not fool ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So. I think there's a couple of ways, and we're actually at a very exciting time right now, I think, because we are shifting how things work, and I'm not a big believer in forcing things. What do I mean by forcing things? I mean, creating quotas, just thinking that you can snap your fingers and say, oh gosh, it's, let's get more women to be entrepreneurs. It's not that simple. I think it requires systemic change that happens slowly, and that we have to take things in meaningful, deliberate steps towards that goal.
Yeah, but if I can challenge you a little bit on that point, you just made, the quota stuff. Okay, if there's not going to be a quota, would you say access is really important, right? To make sure if my project is, if the project, if I've worked on, let's say a startup, and it I should have the opportunity to access.
We're going down the same line, Eric.
Okay.
So I think what needs to change is, and what is about to change, I think, is who are making decisions about investing, who's putting money in, who gets money, and who ultimately benefits from these investments. So all those things are changing. So little things. I mean, look, first of all, my entire investment team, or our entire investment team on Tech Global, is female.
Awesome.
Right? So that's already a first change. That was a very deliberate choice to make. Now, you can call that a quota. I don't call it a quota. I call it.
But these are intelligent women. These are people that academically, I'm sure, and performance wise, they.
Yeah, if I could say, they're all kick-ass people, right?
Yeah. So
right, and I know that, and they come from a non-typical profile, I would say, as investment officers, and I think that's part of it. So I had to make I won't even call it a leap of faith. It sounds like it was a leap of faith of some kind, but we had to make a deliberate choice at OnTap to say, no, let's hire people who will think about the world differently than your typical, I hate to say, tech bro.
Yeah.
Because it's not about being white or Asian or whatever. You're still going to have your typical. I mean, let's look at the Lagos tech ecosystem. It's dominated by males.
Yeah,
almost all males. And,
even worse if if you kind of venture into the whole crypto
right.
blockchain
Oh gosh, yes.
stratosphere, right?
Yes,
It's
yes.
all bros there, bros
Yeah.
business.
And you can go about your life in a very typical
Mm,
venture VC
mm,
way. It's like, who's on the inside? Who do I trust? Who do I get along
mm,
with? Who did I hear about? Let's go after the deals that everybody's going
mm,
after. You can do it that way. Yeah, but you're not going to change much.
mm.
Oh yeah, you'll make money, but you're not going to change much.
And a
And
common
our
theme I
goal
hear
is
from you, Jim, is that you want to create, through your approach, systematic,
systematic change.
yeah,
Yep.
change, sustainable, change, as well. Um,
Systematic, and I think let me just co-opt your word
mm,
sustainable.
mm,
Systematic change that happens like a flywheel,
okay.
right? Versus being legislatively enforced
Mm,
or top-down enforced. Not to say those things are wrong. I just don't think they're as effective, scalable, or efficient as creating the mechanisms for the systems to change on their own.
mm,
Right. So the other piece that I want to talk about, which
mm,
I think is just really critically important, because we talk about our investment team and the fact they're all female. That's great. But what's happening now too is there is a steady shift, and I think investing in the next 10 years is going to look very different
yeah.
than investing in the last 10 years. Because what's happening is that more and more people now have access to invest in alternative investment instruments that were once only the playing ground of rich people or rich white people, rich white males,
Mm,
in fact. I'll tell you a little story. I was very, very, very fortunate to have become to start investing in venture funds back in the mid 2000s. And I invested in a few, and one of them, did very well. And I remember going to their annual investor meeting, LP meeting,
yeah.
back to, I think it was 2016, 2017,
Mm,
something fairly recent actually. It was the first time that I actually interacted with all the other LPs. I walked in the room and I realized I was one of the only non-white males over non-white males under 50 in the whole room.
mm,
And it wasn't, and the GPs are awesome. They're great people.
mm.
And they weren't sitting there going, we're only going to let, older male white
Mm,
males. No, of course not. Right. But it's all about networks. It's about who you know. And I was fortunate enough to know somebody who invited me into this group and
and
so
it
on.
helps to have also attended, Stanford, right?
Actually, that had nothing to do with it.
Okay.
That
Mm,
situation. But
mm,
I was just lucky, right? I
mm.
was lucky that I knew the right person and so on. But yes, you're right. Those things like having attended
But
Stanford.
the conversation starts, let's say, when when you engage and somebody knows is different from, let's say, I attended, Eric attended some, some community college, right? And here's Jim Stanford, it kind of, all the person is more engaging, will be more willing to
Let me
engage,
tell
right?
you,
Yeah,
a
yeah,
person who raises money
yeah,
for reinvesting. I don't call
yeah,
myself fund manager because I think it's a bad word.
yeah,
But
yeah.
as somebody, they weren't sitting there going, "Oh, what's this LP's educational background?" Before,
Mm,
no, you have money, you're investing you're aligned with our investment thesis.
okay.
You can do the minimums, 250K or
Mm,
half a million, whatever the minimums were. Let's do it. Come at it, right? So I think a lot of this is about the models for the history of socioeconomic disparities. Number one, so that's a
yeah.
big one, right? But also the kind of instruments that are available. So what's happening now, and I think this is the point that I was trying to make,
Mm,
well, before I digressed on that story, is today more and more platforms are becoming available that allow anyone to invest in things that were only investable by the very rich even 5 years ago. Institutional bonds, you still have to be an accredited investor,
investor, okay.
right? But you don't have to be a super wealthy person. You can just be a regular wealthy
Mm-hmm.
person. But that's going to continue. And I think what's happening with DeFi, decentralized finance, is going to keep moving in that trend. And I see this as a broader 50-year trend, right?
Absolutely.
Back in the 50s and 60s, you had to be part of a country club and be part of a golf course and golf and be male in order to have a stockbroker and investor money.
Absolutely.
Then you
There
had
used to
things
be
like
there's an exclusive club of the well-to-do. So
right. Then
absolutely.
Charles Schwab came along and had created discount brokerages. So now you could just be anybody and invest. And then we have Robinhood, who's now trying to make that available to everyone. You have Republic, who is allowing venture investors, or I'm sorry, regular people to
democratization. Does that describe it? What Robinhood is?
Democratization, yes, but I would call the digitization of investing, because the thing that makes it possible for us to do this is not a legal change or even a mentality. You know, my GP, the GPs that in the fund that I invested in weren't sitting there going, we're only going to take money from these people, not because of anything, simply because you can't take money from thousands of people. Administratively and legally, it was difficult, right? But now with digital investment platform, that's changing. And so now individuals who only want to invest $10,000 into venture or into startups can do that. You don't have to do 250,000 or $500,000 or $1 million. You can do that with very little money. With the explosion of crowdfunding platforms, you can now put in a few $1,000s into a bunch of small companies, which, again, going back to my financial economics days at Stanford, right? That is actually a more efficient way to invest, right? Diversification into high risk, that's the best way to invest, right? And so I think things are changing in a way that will allow more and more people, more normal people, let's use that word, to become investors in these alternative assets. One of which we at Untapped Global are trying to change. One of which we hope is investing in emerging markets. Why, including Africa or the markets in Africa.
And if you don't mind, I just want you to pause it a little bit, and I want to reference. In one or two, before you kind of just, I'll let you kind of land on that point. In one of your recent, blogs on Medium, you said there's $1 trillion opportunity on the continent. Could you?
Wow, that's even that's a very narrow piece of it. So as a venture investor, and not a lot of people know this or realize this, but this is truly the case. Venture really only works with certain kinds of companies. When I say works, meaning make the numbers work, make enough money to make it worthwhile for investors. So it generally only works for companies, investing in companies that go big with a small investment. Right? That means oftentimes asset-light companies that are working in some kind of winner-take-all sectors. Fintech is a perfect example, right? You put in a couple $1 million into a company, and all of a sudden, it's serving 150 million people. Kuda Bank in Nigeria, for example, right? It didn't raise a lot of money before it started to create that flywheel. But if you look at what the mass potential is in Africa or in many emerging markets, it's not those kind of businesses. It's the vendor on the corner street. It's the motorcycle taxi driver. It's the Uber driver. It's the person setting up a new grocery store, providing clean water. It's all those things that are hardware intensive and, quite frankly, don't really fit the venture model well. So in my blog post, what I was saying is that let's not forget about the opportunity to finance regular businesses.
Absolutely.
Right? That make good money, but actually provide the basic services to the population, because that is a $5.2 trillion market. And that number comes from the World Bank study on the financing gap for small and medium-sized enterprises. Right?
Absolutely.
And this is not venture money. This is a market that requires a whole new model. And that's why we created a whole new investment model that we call smart asset financing. Because, we all know, the World Bank certainly knows, many policymakers, many investors even know that there's this massive gap, that there's massive market opportunity. But how do you go after that? And the problem is, if you apply your usual way of doing financing, it doesn't work for small businesses,
Yes.
especially
Yes.
in Africa, right? Yes, let's lend you some money. Okay, Eric, how much is your house worth? Wait, I don't have a house.
Yeah.
Wait, show me your balance sheet. A balance sheet?
Yeah.
What? I've only been in business for a year.
Yeah.
As an Uber driver. Show me your credit history. Well, gosh, I've been just driving Uber cars, but using my cousin's car to do that. I don't
Yeah.
have a credit history.
Absolutely.
I don't even have a paycheck. I can't get credit to lease a car. So all these people are excluded from the marketplace. But what's happened in Africa is that ever increasingly so, more and more things are becoming digital. The motorcycle is becoming digital. There's an app that manages the Uber drivers' affairs and driving behavior. There's a POS system, point of sale system, that allows a small merchant in Kaduna to accept digital payments. There is a water system that is digitally connected that provides clean water and you can measure. So we created this model called Smart Asset Financing that essentially allows investors from overseas to invest in those assets and get the revenue streams directly from those assets. And by doing that, we're creating a whole new asset class for investors to invest in that is not venture, that actually captures in a scalable way the investment opportunity of investing in small businesses that have some type of hardware or asset at the center of it. And if you look at, Africa's going to add another 1 billion people in the next 30 years. All those people, including those who aren't well served today, they all need stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Motorcycles and cars for transport. They need to drink clean water. They need the farmers to be very efficient. So they need the farmers to have tools to be able to increase their yields. That's what the continent needs.
Absolutely.
And if you don't have the right financing mechanisms to do that, then you're leaving a shitload of money on the table.
Absolutely.
But you're leaving a shitload of empowerment on the table too. That's what we're hoping.
That's amazing. And it kind of aligns with what's something that we're doing here in the chamber. We said, hey, if Africa, for instance, if majority of, a good chunk of it, is rural, over, I think, close to about 70% of that is. And I was like, whatever it is you're doing, if it's not, it's inclusive of, that 70% of, those rural dwellers, then, you're not going to get the desired impact of the result, right? And I see there's something that ONTAP is doing, focusing on that, that demography, through fractionally, either financing through fractional methodology, or just focusing on I would say fractionally, right?
I mean, look, I think sometimes it's said too often. It's almost become glib. No one explains it. But digitization is going to change everything. Digitization is the route to democratizing both the who gets the money and who is investing in the money. And so digitization will make fractional investment possible. It will make the fractional receipt of money possible. And so that is really the key driver to what's creating this opportunity in the world.
Absolutely. And we're probably saying, for those that are watching out there, and I'm glad, one of the head of logistics is also joining in our virtual, as one of the virtual, in the virtual, as part of the virtual audience. And we want to really proudly share with everyone that is streaming out there that we are working on what we call, the rural, infrastructure financing, which is a fractional approach of, financing, rural, projects, and using a lot of people that are clocking in, working 9 to 5s in the United States and the diaspora, and how can you create a platform where you could, participate in financing. The likes of Jim can do but so much, right? But what can we, as also natives, complement, what he's doing with his own limited resources?
And Eric, I would say please include us in that. We want to be part of what that sounds like a very interesting initiative, and I think you're right on. I think creating that fractional ownership, or at least fractional the ability to fractionally invest.
Yeah.
That's what's going to change things. And
Yeah,
since you're using that word, I think there's also a really important thing that's happening, which is this consolidation of informal markets. I mean, 60-70% of the market in Nigeria is informal.
Absolutely.
And digitization is going to allow us to consolidate that, or aggregate at least, if not consolidate. Consolidate sounds, very top down, but at least aggregate that so that a investor sitting in Chicago can invest in that meaningfully. Because right now they can't, or in the past they can't. Right now they can through us, but in the past they couldn't. Because you can't. Not everybody can fly to Kaduna. Absolutely. And even if you do, you might be able to. You meet one person, and the risk of investing in one person is really high. But what if you can invest in 2,000 of those one persons, and have using the digital tool to make that transparent to you and trackable, and allow you to safely get your money back? That's the potential
that is mind blowing. That is the future right there, right?
That is the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to also, if you could just touch, kind of just, I know you probably have visited, some parts of, more states in Nigeria than a lot of, people you meet in Lagos, for instance, right? There are a lot of people you probably been in Lagos, they have never set foot, like in Kaduna or Kano or those places, right?
Yeah.
And it happens that one of the richest, persons, from Nigeria happens to be from Kano as well. But they sense, there's it's good to have, I was so pleased, so it's quite a delight, to kind of just hear you visiting, those places, the Port Harcourts of this world, the Kanos and Kadunas, and just places that I've also been, and also indulging in their local delicacies as well. So it's it's pretty. I like that you're thoroughly immersive, when it comes to your activities here.
Yes,
So I'm really
goat head soup. Once you have goat head soup in Ghana,
I'm telling you,
can never be the same.
I have a feeling I'm going to go out. I'm going to tell my wife, we should go out and look for that, at the African restaurant or something. So you're triggering a lot of, some nostalgic stuff here. But I know what we're going to do now. I'll kind of just give you about 5 minutes. We're going to go on a quick break. I'll pause here, let you kind of just find, maybe just a little water, and get back in like 2 minutes. And meanwhile, we'll have the likes of Odakama Sharon and others to prepare their questions, they want to ask. So
Great.
Absolutely, but it has been pretty and amazing, just back and forth, kind of hearing your experiences. And in the next few minutes, we want to venture into other things that I feel equally that are important, that people want to get to hear from you, and also what the expectation is for Dubai and all the things that we intend to do. So
Excellent.
A quick weather break, and for folks that are watching out there, we'll be back in a sec. Thank you.
Sounds good.
Welcome from the water break, right?
Yes, thank you for that.
Yeah, and thank you for joining us. If you're joining us now, just joining, we have Jim Chu, the CEO of Untapped Global. He is a U.S. entity, but operates in Africa and Asia, I believe, as well. I don't know. I think you do things in Asia as well, too, right?
Well, so not yet. We're planning
okay.
to head into Asia in 2023, but so far not yet. We have investments in. We actually do have some investments in Asia, but it's not very extensive. But we have smart asset financing projects in most of the main African markets, and also in Latin America.
Awesome. And and talking about smart finance, and I'm sure a lot of people are kind of curious about smart finance. And I now that you've taken, beautiful, it's warm over there in your room and the sitting room, and you've had a glass of water, I'm sure. If you could just touch on that smart finance and how at Untapped Global you're leveraging such an approach, to create, to change, to create.
Yeah. So again, going back to what we were saying earlier, one of the key issues is really about if you're doing financing, especially for small businesses, right? As I like to say, there's this big gap in the middle. If you need to borrow $500 to buy a cow, it's actually pretty easy to do. There's a lot of microfinance out there. If you want to raise $20 million to build a power plant, it's also fairly straightforward to do if you know how to run a power plant. But anything in between, and I use the word anything, it sounds like an exaggeration, but it's not. Almost anything in between those two extremes is extremely difficult to find the appropriate financing for your business. So if you need $20,000 to, as the example I gave earlier, to start driving a taxi, it's hard to find that money. It's hard. So you go to your family, your relative, or God forbid, to the informal lending markets, which can be very
predatory,
very
right?
Predatory, exactly. and ultimately you don't have that many options. But with smart asset financing, the way we kind of unlock all this untapped value and untapped workforce is we look at businesses that have some kind of smart asset at the core of their business. And we take the future revenue streams generated by that asset as the security for our financing. So instead of saying, okay, well, gosh, how big is your house and can we put a mortgage on it? Or let's send a credit officer to all 6,000 of our borrowers, which isn't very scalable. Let's actually use the data and the digital revenue streams coming from these smart assets as a way to both measure and manage risk, but also get repaid. And that way is much more scalable than the old way. So you just think about it, and some of this is just about simple economics, right? So if you have a $3,000 loan, well, whether the loan is $3,000 or $100,000 or $1 million, you're gonna have to assign a credit officer to.
Yes.
And now you have the credit officer do all the things that credit officer does. And that cost is fixed no matter how big the loan is, which means it incentivizes everybody to do larger loans. Because just the cost as a percentage of the overall is just way too big if you're trying to service a $3,000 loan. So guess what happens? No one does the $3,000 loan, or the $10,000 loan, or the $20,000 loan. And so they get completely left out. Or they do it in a way that is risky. Like, yeah, we'll just give you money. But that's risky.
Just wing it, right?
Just wing it. That's risky. So you're not managing risk at all. You're just doing it.
Yeah.
Right? So in small lending, you have really high administrative costs. You have to pay the credit officer, and really high default risk. But if we apply a approach of smart asset financing to that, then not only do shift away from people who are already in the system. Yeah, you have a credit history, you have a pay stub, blah, 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 to those who have the energy and potential to create value, but don't have the history. And you make it feasible and possible and worthwhile economically to finance the $3,000 loan requirements, the $10,000, the $20,000, which is the bulk of the need in the African continent.
Absolutely, absolutely. And 5 years from now, where do you think Untapped is going to be with the smart finance, and what kind of design, what kind of impact do you see?
No. So I'll start with a 10-year goal first, right?
Okay.
But by 2030, by 2030 we want to reach 1 billion people. We want to reach 1 billion people. We want to empower 1 billion people, 1 billion entrepreneurs, and give them access to financing and access to ability to create wealth with their own blood, sweat, and tears.
Awesome. And I would like to ask a follow-up question. Before I go to Udakama, share some nice questions there for you. I would like to involve the virtual audience, or after this follow-up question. For instance, how do we turn some of your friends that are not involved in anything that has to do with investment in Africa, for instance, or anywhere else for that matter, that probably have unicorned or have exited, and all those other people, the millionaires and billionaires, right? Because recently, Udakama, Sharon was doing a research for our team. We looked at, they were predominantly tech-based, billionaires that are out of the state. They're sitting, that technology has blessed them with so much wealth. How can you have such people working with either Untapped or having them converting some of their out of their resource to invest in a place like Africa, knowing that it's not just going to be charity, but there will be something coming in return as well as a return on investment.
Yeah. The short, simple answer to that is one at a time. It's unfortunately, that's the question that we at Untapped Global and our whole team deals with on a daily basis. That's our goal. How do we reach? Now, we know there's an opportunity with all these digital platforms being created, but how do we reach and convince, and I hate to use the word educate, but inform all these people? And that's not easy. And that's a next 10-year task. And so what we've created, what we're launching in April and in November, is an investment platform that allows any investor to invest in an entrepreneur in Africa. And not just one entrepreneur, and it's not just charity. I think Kiva has done a lot to educate people, but Kiva is still charity. 0% interest. You only give charity money for that. And what we want to create is a truly viable investment platform that is attractive to investors, but at the same time allows anyone, even somebody with just $500 to invest in Africa. And in addition to that, start to change the narrative of what it's like or what's needed to change the world. It isn't just charity. Charity plays a role, of course, but I think more sustainably, more powerfully, and more scalably, it's empowering entrepreneurs to solve problems in their own communities. That is what will create wealth, create a better world, and create a more equitable society for all of us.
Yeah, so that's awesome. And I also believe there's an important role that Untapped is serving. It's now a reference for others to say, hey, look at what Jim with his team are doing, and people can feel comfortable enough to either work with you or even kind of venture into it, on their own, I think.
Right. What we hope to achieve is just to ignite a movement. Right. We hope a lot of people copy what we're doing. We hope a lot of people start deploying smart asset financing in emerging markets. We hope a lot of investment platforms start putting their money towards smart asset financing as an asset class. We hope to, one of the value adds, one of the key pieces that we want to do is to be that connector, right? To take all the different sources of financing. There's loads, right? No one company it's very hard for a company, even if they're big, to manage all these sources of capital. Family offices, institutional investors, crypto, DeFi, commercial loans. Yeah, it's huge. Oh yeah, and there's even things like carbon credits or even charity, right? How do you manage all of that?
There's so much
well,
in that.
What we want to do is to make it really simple by managing all that for small entrepreneurs. So be the expert.
And I think that is brilliant. It takes away a whole lot from people looking at it as there's a web of, there's so much going on there. That web of either some might look at it confusion or it's challenging to someone that wants to simplify, doesn't want to invest, hey, just 1-2 steps, I just want to invest money and I don't want to go through all that to invest money. I think that serves that purpose as well. But I wanted to pose there.
And then on the other side, though, right? But on the other side, I think it's important that what we're also doing is aggregating or putting together a whole bunch of different opportunities, Nigerian ones, Kenyan ones, South African ones, Egyptian ones, so that you get a nice diversified portfolio.
Absolutely.
So that when you invest and something happens in Nigeria, you're not going, oh no, because your investment is diversified across all of these markets. Sorry, go ahead. You wanted to.
And I just wanted to add, I said if there's anything, because I do track and kind of I look at other people that are involved with Africa. I was particularly drawn to you or Untapped because it's there's a bit of your approach is a bit different in the sense that it's inclusive. It's not just, you don't look at it as a charitable, as a collaboration, you're looking at more like in some instances. And it's actually having boots on ground and working with the locals and natives and others, to accomplish what you've set out to do. But I wanted to hang on there for a minute. I just want to give an opportunity for a Q&A, and I was spotlighting you. If you're watching out there, we have Jim Chu, the CEO of Untapped, Global. An amazing, multifaceted, investor, entrepreneur, and what have you, that is doing amazing things, like in Africa. And there's a lot, becoming that, I would say Untapped is becoming a kind of a reference point or a model, for others to also look at and also maybe use as a template. And I want to give, you the opportunity. While we're spotlighting you, there are a few questions in the chat here. If you could, I don't know if you want me to read it out or you just want to read it out.
Yeah, very happy to.
Okay.
Gosh, there are quite a few. So, so you asked a couple of questions around COVID and what the impact of COVID has been on both our business and on African continent.
And it's coming from Sharon Odokama, George Will, and she is the head of logistics for the Africa Chamber of Digital Commerce.
Great. Pleasure meeting you, Odokama, Sharon. So, I actually think the pandemic helped create more opportunities than, obviously it was very negatively impactful for many, but it also created a lot more opportunities. And I actually think it boosted venture investment into the continent. Couple of different ways. One of the ways is that it simply made communication a little bit less arduous. So I'll give you an example. One of the things that we do, and I know you know this, Eric, is we run a program called The Nest. And it's every month we have on Zoom entrepreneurs from Africa and other emerging markets, Asia, South, Latin America, etc., and have them present to a panel of angel investors as well as other investors from around the world. And that forum I launched at the very beginning of the pandemic. Why? Because, well, we're in lockdown, we're stuck, and that was the really right way to get everybody online. But if I can imagine, if I kind of rewind back to 2019, 2018, 2017, people didn't do that. It wouldn't have attracted anyone. And they were like, oh, no, you have to go meet them before you make an investment. And the pandemic changed that. And so it broke down borders in a way that is hard to actually understand, because we think, oh, yeah, okay, so you get on Zoom. But wait a sec. If you imagine how hard it is for, let's say, a Kenyan entrepreneur to talk to an American investor before the pandemic, it was, oh, yes, we got to get a visa. Okay, first of all, you got to buy a plane ticket. You get to the conference. You got to get a ticket to that VIP session over there. Once you get, hustle your way into the VIP session, you got to hustle your way next to that investor. And maximum you have, if you're lucky, 30 seconds to talk to that investor, because they're surrounded by probably 20 entrepreneurs, and that's all they have the patience for. But now on Zoom, people can actually have a 10-minute conversation, 20-minute conversation about the business between somebody sitting in Kisumu, Kenya, and San Francisco, California. That wasn't possible before. I mean, it was technically possible, but people didn't do that. And they certainly didn't make an investment decision from that distance. And so I think the pandemic changed our acceptance of what was possible on digital platforms. And through the digital platform, we had over 100 investors invest, and dozens and dozens of, I think, from over 24 countries receive investment through the Nest platform.
And I love the Nest. I love what. By the way, I love what you're doing with the Nest. I think it's so diverse and so much. Has given a lot of Africans and beyond opportunity. I think kudos to you. And and that leads us to the second question here. I think Odakama is asking how's Untapped investing in human capital aside solutions out of Africa.
Yeah. So look, our approach. I think I said this at the beginning, maybe before Odakama came on. Our core belief is that by creating more efficient channels of investment into a broader set of investees and a more inclusive set of investees, that is the best way to create human capital. There's loads of training initiatives and so on, and we could focus on those, but we think ultimately the best training is by doing, and the best doing requires investment. And so if we're able to unlock $1 billion, which is what I hope to do over the next years, to go into small entrepreneurs who can then use that money to invest in their business, grow their business, hire additional people. I think that's the best way to do it. And Sharon, you may have also missed in the very beginning, I think one of the biggest issues in many emerging markets that have a lot of aid and charity involved is that some of the smartest, most capable people become bureaucrats for NGOs. That is not, and with all due respect to NGOs, they do a lot of great things. That is not the way to generate wealth in countries. It is through innovation and through entrepreneurship and solving problems that generate value for people who buy those products and services. I believe that's the best way, to create markets that weren't there before. That's the way you create wealth. And that's the way you create human capital, in my view.
Awesome answer. Response there. And staying with the Q&A here, we have from Kelvin. Kelvin is the head of communications. I know he was in contact with you. He has been in contact with you both for the podcast and also what we're working on. What your participation as a partner for the Deal Hub or the Deal Room, in the Dubai at the ACOFDC Summit. And Kelvin here is asking, how inclusive is your new platform? The one, I don't know, Kelvin, is it the platform? Is it the Nest, or you're talking about the smart asset, finance? Is it smart asset financing or something like that? which of his platforms you have to be a little.
Well, I can talk to a little bit to both.
Okay.
So if we look at smart asset financing, it is specifically designed to target those who are being left out of the financing system, right? So I don't know how you want to measure inclusivity, Kelvin, but I would argue that the majority of the end recipients of the smart assets that then go out and generate revenue from those assets, they're ones who otherwise would not get financed. So I don't know if that's 20%, 60%, 80%, but it is a sizable percentage. Yeah, it's hard to prove a counterfactual, so I don't know if we weren't around, they would have gotten it. I would argue that, and hopefully, if we achieve our goals of $1 billion, then we should be able to see a lot more people who otherwise would have been left out of the financing system suddenly access financing.
And that means a lot of job for others as well, right? The job creation,
a lot of jobs.
It's my
and meaningful jobs,
yeah,
too, right? Meaningful jobs,
absolutely.
Not just factory jobs, but jobs where they are their own entrepreneurs. That could be, a motorcycle taxi driver for the hundreds of millions of youth that are unemployed. But it could also be for the grocery store owner who can now generate more revenue because they're selling clean water, or it could be helping the small merchant grow their business by offering POS systems that accept digital payments. So now they can become ATM machines. Right? So I think it's not because, I think jobs is the right word, but I think it's sometimes difficult for Americans to understand to the extent to which markets like those in Africa operate informally. Even if it is not an official job, everybody's doing something because they have to. They have to do that to survive. And so we can make those survival jobs, if you want to call them, or informal economy. If we make the informal economy more efficient, have access to more investment capital so they can do more, then those people will win. And that's what I call inclusivity.
Awesome. And you could also make a case for an inclusive digital economy, for it to be, for everybody to be, for it to be meaningful and impactful. It has to, for the type of, folks you're helping on ground in Africa, they have to be included in that process as well. That means they have to have the technology is simplified in a way that it includes them in the process as well. The M-Pesas of this world and other things that are emerging in that. So that is absolutely, I think, is going to be a game changer in how, how people are financed, especially in the grassroots.
Right. And I think we're not necessarily the ones who are going to do the innovation. I think there's just a load of people who are innovating already. People who are, fintech companies like Kuda Bank or Coolblocks or Bank 54. All these companies are innovating to create more digitization in the marketplace, to make it easier for the digital non-natives and emerging digital natives to use these digital platforms, whether it's a feature phone that you have to double tap to pay, or USSD to pay, or a smartphone. People are doing that. So our job, and I think, Kelvin, let me answer that second question that you asked just now, which is, what do you think, or what do I think our unique selling point is at Untapped? I think our unique selling point is to be that bridge. So if I say, well, gosh, you're not doing the innovation, you're just financing it. Well, gosh, you're not raising the money, or you're not necessarily even creating the platforms, you're just taking it from other platforms. But that's what we do. We aggregate and consolidate, diversify, and make it work on both sides. What do I mean by that? We take all the different sources of financing, family offices or institutional or commercial lenders or crypto or whatever, and put that into one facility through us. And on the other side, we do the same thing for the other side. We take all these different innovations, all of them, that create digital revenue streams, and say, here's a digital revenue stream. and it's in Kenya, it's in Nigeria, it's in Benin, it's in Uganda, it's in Zambia, it's in South Africa. And now you can invest in the whole pot. And why is that helpful? And again, for those financial folks out there, it's all about diversification and economies of scale. It does not make sense for a commercial investor in the US to invest in one single $10,000 investment in Zambia. But it does make sense for that investor to invest in a portfolio that covers Zambia or 10,000 of those $10,000 investees in Zambia, but also in Kenya, also in South Africa, also in various other countries. So the value that we bring is vetting, consolidation, and diversification and economies of scale so that it actually works on both sides. Because we all want this to work, right? And how many of us have flown to, we see this all the time, and I'm sure the diaspora is even more so, but of people flying into Nairobi, meeting your taxi driver. Wow, you're a really smart, motivated person with a lot of potential. Let me invest in you. Mm. Now, what if that could happen at a much larger scale than that one single example? Mm. So that millions of investors can put billions of dollars into millions of those taxi drivers. I think that's what our unique value proposition is. It's about scale.
That is awesome. And before we kind of shift gears here a little bit, I just want to, kind of just on a more, non-tech related stuff, I'm sure a lot of people are kind of curious, how does, Jim, how do you unwind? I know I've seen, I know you love your wine. I've seen you do things in South Africa with your team.
How is that what I'm known for? Oh no.
Yeah, yeah. You gotta, hey,
yeah.
I'm sure you have a beautiful wine collection as well. But so what are the things that you do that people, should know, other than, hey, being incredibly awesome and changing people's lives?
I mean, look, I really sincerely enjoy meeting new people and learning from new people. And I think that's one of the benefits that comes with my current job, which is I get to travel to a lot of places that a lot of people don't know about and meet people and listen to their stories and have them tell me things or show me things that I would never even think about or never could even imagine. So that's one of the things I enjoy the very most. And so whenever I get a chance to go somewhere that shows me a different side of society, I go. Whether that's going and talking to the merchants in the Medina in Morocco, or what did I do recently? Yeah, I was in Egypt, talking to many of the shopkeepers there, notably about Arabic desserts, which are amazing. And so all sorts of things you can learn when you go into those types of environments. Even this last time I was in Egypt, I did a Sunday tour and there are many Russian tourists in Egypt. And so I hung out with a van full of Russian tourists for a day, and they taught me a lot about St. Petersburg, those things. So I really enjoy doing that. But more practically, I like getting to outdoors, and one of my most dearest hobbies is paragliding. So I don't know if you're not familiar with paragliding. It's similar to hang gliding, but it's a soft wing or a flexible wing, and we fly. My longest flight is 200 kilometers. And, we fly with the birds, fly the thermals, and I take my paraglider with me in many places I go, whether that's
the bird view. I saw some recently. It was just breathtaking. I seen, I think the I don't know what type of bird, but just to see someone gliding up there with birds, the view from there was just absolutely breathtaking. I was like, okay, I don't think I'm gonna be on. I will have the it's not. I don't see me doing that, but I can
Well, you
sit
never
somewhere
know.
and enjoy, from a distance.
Well, Eric, one of the
Yeah,
things that we organize
yeah,
twice a year actually are visits
yeah,
to Cape Town.
yeah.
And we organize groups of investors to come and meet the entire tech ecosystem in
Mm,
South Africa. Not the entire, but the best folks, investors and entrepreneurs. And
mm.
one of the things we do on that trip is to take everybody paragliding. So if you one day decide you want to invest in Africa as an equity investor and come down to South Africa and see some interesting
Yeah, and
opportunities and go
I'll
paragliding,
I'll
you're
I'll
more than
have
welcome.
Kelvin, or to come take my spot. Yeah,
Indeed.
awesome,
Indeed.
awesome. I know we're coasting to the top of the hour, to round up, this awesome this podcast we're having with you as a build up, to the ACOFDC, Summit 22 in Dubai, come March, 18th.
Yeah.
And we're absolutely delighted, Untapped Global is going to be powering, the deal hub, the deal room, the investment deal room, at the ACOFDC Summit. So we're pretty excited. And before I know we got about roughly about 15 minutes or so. Could you share with us, within the tech ecosystem, what excites you? What are like the projects that first let's start with what are the projects, some of the acquisitions, by American
Yeah.
companies that blew your, socks off. You said, wow, you were not expecting this,
Yeah.
but it
Well,
happened. Right.
well, I can't say that I wasn't expecting it, but I think obviously fintech is big,
Mm,
and the Paystack acquisition, of course, and the fact that companies like Flutterwave are going global. I think those are all
mm,
very exciting. I think the thing that excites me, the phenomenon that excites me probably the most
mm,
in Africa is what the cloud has done to level the playing field for entrepreneurs worldwide. Um, what I mean is, whereas in the past, it was very important to be in Silicon Valley or be in some of these tech hubs around the world
mm,
to access capital and to get customers and get investments, or to even just innovate.
mhm,
I think that is changing with a greater adoption of cloud services and cloud-based products, because it means that a entrepreneur in Cape Town or an entrepreneur in Cairo can create a product or service
mhm,
that then serves the American market or the French market or the British market or whichever markets. And it means that that innovation and that global, or I should say, globalization is less tied to being in the centers of the global economy, which means that an entrepreneur from
mm,
anywhere, if they have the expertise and understanding of the customer and the needs and so on, which isn't easy necessarily for somebody from, let's say, Zimbabwe to
mm.
understand a customer in San Francisco, but it breaks down the barriers significantly. So I think there are going to be more, and there's the opportunity for more global companies coming out of Africa than we've seen in the past. And I am most excited about those companies who not just try to be winners or dominant in a single market,
Mm.
but rather they become regional winners and become global contenders.
So we should expect
That's where
a lot of exits and unicorn, hopefully.
I absolutely think so.
Yeah,
Yes, absolutely
yeah.
think that will be the case.
Awesome, awesome. And I want to ask you, okay, when you're doing your interviews, we recently saw a video of you, you posted on LinkedIn, right? You were with this gentleman out of Paga, right?
Ah,
So
Tayo. Yes.
which one is more comfortable for you? Doing your interviews in a car or just sitting in your living room? Which one is more fun
Well,
for you?
well, gosh, well, certainly
Yeah,
singing in a
yeah,
car is going to be better than singing like this, because you really don't want me to sing.
Yeah. That's
but no, obviously
mm,
these interviews on Zoom like this is always the most comfortable.
yeah, but I thought that was a little bit refreshing. That was kind of just seeing you and I thought that was that was
Thank
pretty
you.
fun.
Well,
It gets
it was very
sitting down
unplanned,
like this has become
unscripted,
a
and
little bit
spontaneous.
yeah.
So I would say my challenge to anyone listening, whether on recording or live, is if you come to San Francisco, please visit me. But the prerequisite is that you do an interview with me in the car.
Awesome on the team, and hopefully we're going to have something done, in Dubai, right? Kelvin and Anola Kalma and the rest
Yes,
of us.
I hope so.
Absolutely, and we're looking forward to that. I think it's pretty exciting, and what really enamors me to what I'm absolutely gravitated me towards, like on tap was the certain things I saw that you were doing genuinely, especially from the leadership, standing with you genuinely. You care about the content, the community, and just totally immersed in saying it, and being that in the forefront of leading others to look at the opportunities, and also empower a lot of lives, and creating, and the ripple effect of that is creating a ton of jobs here in the Chamber of Africa Chamber of Digital Commerce. We're big on jobs. We're big on changing of the mindset. We're big on allyship. We're big on just leveraging technology like it has never been leveraged before, and less charity, and just mobilizing amongst ourselves to do more, and I feel is exemplified at Untapped Global, and we're glad we've connected and also partnering for this project, and we're looking forward to seeing your friends and others that are going to be in the Deal Hub for us to introduce others, hopefully we're able to do some matchmaking, and hopefully something will trigger interest in there. But with that said, what region in Africa people slipping on? What's going to be the next? I was surprised of Egypt, for instance, right? For some of us that are not really in the business like yourself, you probably were not surprised, Egypt, those investments we started seeing out of Egypt.
Yeah.
So what part of the continent, Egypt, Nigeria, those we see on the
those
news
are
every
known,
day.
right? Yes.
So which one are people slipping on that we should be on the lookout for? That's
well, I think there's some that they're just under the covers, although a lot of people are aware. I think Senegal is a really interesting market. Senegal has
Wave,
indeed.
Okay.
But there's just very strong government support for entrepreneurship, which is always very useful. And a lot of things happening, a lot of venture dollars rolling into that country. I think Rwanda also has really interesting economy and government support, although it's a smaller market. It's interesting. I think, and I know this is not the exact question you asked, but I think e-mobility, electric mobility, is something that's going to blow up very soon. Don't know exactly when, whether that's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years, but it's going to blow up. I think it's going to explode. It's already exploding in certain markets, like in East Africa, but I think it more and more so will become a big thing. And that just, I think, global factors coming together. The fact that China is forging ahead with massive production capacity and massive skill sets, and probably, we don't see it here in the U.S., but probably incredible electric vehicles coming out of that market, just because of the type of skill sets necessary to create a really good electric vehicle, which is mostly software, right? And that's going to come out of China. By doing so, that's going to create that opportunity for Africa, in the sense that it's going to create so much supply of interesting products that the entire continent can absorb.
Awesome. In your line of work and what do you do, venturing a little bit into the public sector, for instance, where do you want to see improvement in the public-private, the PPP, like the public-private, partnerships? What do you want to see, like, countries doing more to encourage someone like you and others that are inspired by, let's say, what Untapped is doing, to want to go and venture and do that? What do you want to say from a lot of government folks that are listening out there before you touch on Kelvin's question on government?
I think governments need to make, I don't remember the exact number, so I'm not going to try to quote too much, but there's a quote in The Economist recently that's quite interesting. If you look at in the US, or actually I think US and Europe, global economy, less than 1%, forgot the exact percentage, but less than 1% of global investments go into venture. But venture has created 85 or 80 some percent of the value created in the last 10 years. Think about that. Less than 1% is creating the majority of the value that's created in the marketplace in the last 2 decades. Government policymakers need to think about that and figure out how to make, just like Senegalese government has done, how to make investment into high-risk innovative ventures easier, more profitable, and more attractive for international capital.
And hopefully we're going to hear more of that, when you do on your panel, right? And I'm sure, I'm a little bit, I'm kind of just trying to make sure we reserve a little bit more for the delegates, like in Dubai, where you're going to be on the panel, that will touch on that subject of, the inclusivity within the tech ecosystem, and also the public-private partnerships to encourage, investors, and how can we transform those millennials that are sitting on immense wealth, and some of them that you've interacted and you've known and are friends with you, to becoming investors as well. I know we have roughly about 5 minutes, and I would love if you can answer that's Kelvin's question, and then we'll give you the rest of the 4 minutes and kind of just for you to
so the question
help us wrap it up. Yes, it's the government. He said the government are asking
infrastructure or startups, right? Well, I don't think governments are good at investing in startups. I think what the role of the government should be is to make the ground fertile for startups. So make it easy to start a startup. Make it easy, for example, for foreign investors to put their money into these startups and get their money out.
Absolutely.
Make the laws easy so that this is one very specific thing. For example, a lot of African companies are becoming US C corps. Why? Because it's almost like being the new generic jurisdiction, right? Delaware C corp is becoming a very, very generic. Make it easier for American C corps operating in Africa to operate. You could probably create new legislation so that American C corps can have Senegalese, well, Senegal probably has this already, but South African subsidiaries, and make sure that make it really easy, because we're in a global economy. It isn't about being South African or American anymore. It's about American capital, South African entrepreneurship, Kenyan entrepreneurship, Kenyan capital, Nigerian capital, all mixing together. And if you're creating all these barriers, or you're making it hard for that capital to move to the right place, to the place where you have the most promising companies and entrepreneurs, then you're just shooting yourself in the foot.
Absolutely.
So to Kelvin's question, it's investing in the infrastructure, not necessarily just faster internet and stuff like that, but in the right policies to encourage investment into startups by global capital and local capital.
Brilliant. And that brings us to, I wish we could go on and on and on. I think this has been an amazing, conversation, with you, Jim. And I know we're going to be, you're just starting in terms of, what you're trying to accomplish with the billion. I think you're trying to, with some of the initiatives you've shared with us today, and the things that you've already done that have yielded a lot of opportunities for others. And I think, for those that are watching out there, here in the Africa Chamber of Digital Commerce, we want to, we want to celebrate, have you smell your roses while you're here, right? And then reach out, reach out to you and say, hey, you're doing an amazing, job on the continent, and in an inclusive way, in a diverse, way. Continue to do what you're doing, Jim, and you have become a template. That's my opinion, in a lot of ways for others to follow suit as well. On behalf of myself and as the CEO and the president of the Africa Chamber of Digital Commerce and our decentralized, team, we have the head of, logistics, Sharon Odokama Georgewell, a brilliant, lady out of Abuja, Nigeria.
You're in Abuja.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, Kelvin is also in Makurdi, Nigeria, as well. Yeah, so we feel there has to be interaction between the diaspora and our sisters, brothers on the continent more consistently for us to accelerate that development that we've always talked about, and work with allies, and you've become a son of the continent in some ways, and we're really proud of what you're doing. And hey, we're looking forward to doing a whole lot of amazing things with Untapped Global, starting with the deal, the investment deal room in Dubai at the ACOFDC Summit. Thank you for streaming today, and also for those that joined us here in the virtual audience. Thank you immensely for the great questions and making time. And I would like to give Jim 2 minutes to kind of just help us wrap this up, and whatever it is you want to share with the rest of the world today before we call it a wrap.
Yeah. So, gosh, I feel like I've said so much already.
Yeah.
But I think I want to leave everybody with just one idea about how historic of a moment that we're living in right now, in the sense of this dual digitization that's happening. Digitization of the economies in markets like those in Africa and other emerging markets, and especially of the informal markets in those markets, but also of a mirror digitization happening on the investment front all around the world, including in developed countries, with decentralized finance and not crypto per se, but just this whole sector of digitizing how people are investing their money. There's an incredible opportunity that we have now, and we will, I believe, whether it's me or others, will hope to realize in the next 5 to 10 years, of bringing those two sides together, of changing who gets the money, how they get the money, and what they use the money for, of changing who gets to invest, who gets to connect with people on the other side of the world. I think we're seeing that historic shift right now. And I personally want to be dead center in that innovation. And so I encourage everyone to think about that, and encourage everyone, if you're an investor, start investing in Africa, start investing in Southeast Asia, start investing in these alternative markets. Doesn't have to be your entire asset base, but get to understand it. And if you're an entrepreneur in Nigeria or Zimbabwe or in South Africa, understand how digital tools can improve how you do things, because they're accessible to all of us, even Absolutely. In some of the most remote areas in Africa. So let's take advantage of them. Connect yourself to the digital economy, and let's create one single better society for the future.
Thank you. And thank you for, on a beautiful, Sunday. I don't know if it's I know the Bay Area is known for beautiful weather, but nevertheless, yeah, let's get a pan.
I'll show you.
Awesome. Oh man.
happen to
I
be
am
in
jealous
Monterey. So the weather is beautiful
Awesome,
outside
awesome,
indeed.
awesome, awesome. This is
So
gorgeous. But
I'm
thank
hoping.
you, Jim Chu, CEO of Untapped Global, entrepreneur, investor, philanthropist. Thank you for making time today to kind of just share your journey and all the things, awesome things you've been doing, especially the ones you've been doing with Haiti and Africa. We thank you immensely for doing that. And we're looking forward to more conversations on that and also connecting with you when we meet, in Dubai. And thank you others for joining as well. And enjoy the rest of the Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you in
Thank
March
you.
in Dubai. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.